I'm curious about the anti-Googlism. I am curious about the idea of freedom and democracy no longer compatible, the anti-political correctness, this notion of freedom, because I'm looking at reflections, sort of shadows of that in our society, in our discourse. So, we can look at like someone like the Mercers, for instance, and see where they've spent their dollars in developing stuff. It feels a little bit more obscured with Thiel. I'm curious about Rumble, and I'm curious about JD Vance, and I'm curious about what his project is, because one of the things, like I see these reflections, at least in our little world, is Glenn Greenwald, who was actually spied on by Palantir years ago, and is now become at least somewhat of a, I wouldn't say necessarily a booster of JD Vance, but certainly is coming out and saying some sort of positive things. He's become a specific critic of Google in terms of their, but not offering any type of antitrust stuff, right? It's just like a malevolent figure where there's no structural reform to be had. Just deal with that. All of this looks to me very Peter Thielian.
Yeah, well, I think so a couple of things there, and people who are listening probably already know this, but JD Vance, in addition to writing Hillbilly Elegy, and becoming famous for that and having a Netflix movie based on it, et cetera, worked for Peter Thiel around the same time as a venture capitalist. He runs a venture capital firm now called Naria that Thiel is a major investor in. The way these VC firms work, right? Like an anchor investor like Peter Thiel can help more or less create the firm. So Thiel is a super important business partner to JD Vance in his private life, and of course has donated $10 million to JD Vance's super PAC. I think that the way Thiel's money works, so Thiel is not a very hands-on guy. I think what he's very good at is sending signals to people like JD Vance and to other Republican politicians, right? That he is out there willing to spend big money on these kind of Trumpist candidates who are going to go hard on immigration, who are going to, as you say, talk about tech billionaires as the saviors that they are, as Peter Thiel sees them, and who are going to, basically in every way for this like Thiel agenda. And I don't know if Rumble, so Vance and Thiel both invested in Rumble. That's a YouTube competitor at the same time that Thiel has been, criticizing Google relentlessly, and JD Vance has been criticizing Google relentlessly. And it's possible that, I think it's possible that they think, who knows, maybe there's some synergy here, and actually our criticisms will work and Rumble will take off. I also think it's a way to get some press attention for both of them, frankly. And so I don't know, I don't know how seriously to take Rumble as like a threat to Google, but this is kind of classic Thiel, which is sort of combining both, sort of political stuff with business stuff. And I think, when I was writing the book, I was reading Cokeland by Christopher Leonard. It's really good. And it kind of talks about the way there's the Coke industry is this big industrial company is feeding this political project, which was for decades, trying to take over kind of the mainstream Republican Party. And I think Thiel's kind of doing a very similar thing, but with a post-industrial, it's not a company, it's a collection of companies, but it's this conglomerate of Thiel's interests. And the political project, instead of trying to take over the Republican Party, it's trying to take over this, the Trumpist wing of the Republican Party, or to make that the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like Rumble's not necessarily a play to take away from Google as much as it is a play to create, to control a right-wing narrative, because that ultimately is just going to be like the Fox News of I guess the social media video, and you want to be the one who's like sort of curating it essentially.
Yeah, and it's nice to have some, Glenn Greenwald, of course, like, he gets people make fun of him a lot and everything, and it's hard to there've been so many contradictions. I think it's sometimes hard to take him seriously, but I mean, it's nice to have Glenn Greenwald on your side, especially given, as you said, that Greenwald was involved in a story with Palantir. Palantir created this presentation, that basically, encouraged an information operation against Glenn Greenwald. It's amazing that he's done a 180 or it seems like he's done a 180 anyway on Peter Thiel. And it seems like the money's been kind of cheap. I don't know how big the contract is, right? But it's probably, in the six figures. And I know that's a lot of money, but it's not necessarily a lot of money for somebody like Thiel or even JD Vance.
Has Palantir reformed? Do you think that they're a better company with a more with a better sense of their civic responsibilities and not spying on journalists and not infringing upon our civil rights?
Well, I think I think that Palantir, like all these companies in the Thiel kind of universe, basically is run according to the dictates that are laid out in Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, and other speeches, which more or less says that doing things that are ethically questionable, breaking the rules is okay. And I think we've seen that over and over again with Palantir. It's not just the instance that you brought up with Greenwald, but there's been reporting, in Bloomberg and others of times when Palantir's clients have crossed the line. I was told stories about Palantir salespeople, going into meetings, right, with police departments, and the people on the other side of the sales call are suggesting doing things that are unethical, and the Palantir salespeople are saying, oh, well, you're technically not allowed to do that, but they're not saying don't do it, And I think for all those reasons, we should be really, really skeptical of Palantir. I mean, I do think, I'm sure they've had to grow up some when you get huge government contracts. There's more compliance, I would assume, I would hope, but I think there are lots of reasons to be skeptical. And I also think it's worth being skeptical of Palantir's ethics. I also think it's worth being skeptical of the company's business claims, because a lot of times people get spun up and they think, they're big brother, they want to do this thing with Greenwald, they must be able to, basically read our minds. And I think Palantir actually kind of, it isn't as good as they say it is. And that's another reason to kind of question the company that doesn't have anything to do with ethics, just has to do with their kind of capabilities.
Well, fascinating stuff, Max Chafkin, features editor and writer at Bloomberg Businessweek, author of The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.